Welcome to OG Benchmarks. While it isn't anything fancy, this video goes through my first real ITX build, even if it's just a bare bones kit. Here is the star of the show, the Jetway Computer JBC231C98-525-BB. BB stands for bare bones. This is a bare bones computer kit with everything you need except RAM and storage. The motherboard has a mini-ITX form factor. I admit I didn't think my first ITX build would be a bare bones kit. I mean, it might as well be a pre-built, but the price was something I couldn't turn down. It was about $50 shipped on eBay. I mean, this was a deal, brand new and still in the original box. Let's see how it arrived. Here is the box. This product was released back in November 2011, almost exactly 10 years ago. It was sold less as a computer and more as a home theater PC. I don't know what the original price was, but I found some old, like 8-year-old posts on Reddit mentioning a price of $200, and the posters were excited about that price. This was not a bargain product, and the box is actually beautiful. The packing material and printing are really nice. You can see the box has some labels. They're very subtle and nicely matched in terms of color that apparently reflect changes in the features of the product. It may be that this same box was used for multiple products, and the labels allow customization of the packaging for the different product lines. So what were the product features for this bare bones kit? Here is a table from the sales literature with the main features. The CPU is an Atom D525. That is a 2-core, 4-thread CPU with very low power, just 13 watts. The GPU is an NVIDIA Ion 2 with 512 megabytes of DDR2 RAM. This is also low powered at just 20 watts. The 512 megabytes of RAM is not ridiculously low, but still on the lower end for a 2011 GPU. But 20 watts is extremely low. This system is not meant to impress. This GPU is integrated into the motherboard and is not part of the CPU. So technically it is a dedicated GPU, but it's not a component that can be changed. This entire system is basically a fancy DVD player that runs Windows in the era of Windows 7. The motherboard takes 2 sticks of RAM, that's DDR2, and supports up to SATA 2. The picture on the left is from the promotional brochure. You can't see much. The tray for the internal DVD player, not included, stands out. And there is a place to mount an SSD or hard drive on the far left. The picture on the right is a system I received with the tray removed. Note that there is no CPU cooler. There is a 60mm fan tucked up against the top edge. Although perhaps ineffective, the case fan means the system is technically not 100% passively cooled. The fan does try to blow across the cooling fins. The fins cover 3 components: the CPU, the GPU, and the chipset. In the image, both the RAM and an SSD are installed. I say installed, but you can see the SSD is just thrown into the case. This case is not super compact for an ITX build. The case is oversized to accommodate the optional DVD player or a sloppy SSD installation. The SSD is connected through a standard SATA data cable. SATA power runs through a Molex connector on the motherboard. The system power comes into the rear I/O of the motherboard. The board calls for a 12-volt connection. The DC adapter, 12 volts at 5 amps for 60 watts total, is included with the computer. With power coming through the board also needs to provide power for any drives. When I ordered this bare bones kit, I had done some research on what cables I needed to power the SSD. When the computer arrived, I found that Jetway had already included all the necessary cables. Very nice. But I wish they had mentioned these items in their parts list to let me know I didn't need to buy them. This is my first time messing with a Molex connector, and I pulled the receptacle pins out of the cable a couple times. Let me know in the comments if you have had the same experience with snug-fitting Molex connectors. The Jetway case is certainly not big for a computer case, but it is bigger than a typical mini PC or HTPC case. Here is a Jetway case. It's at the top of the picture, next to a standard mini PC case at the bottom of the picture for a mini-ITX build. The smaller case is about 200 by 200 millimeters, just big enough to mount a mini-ITX motherboard inside. The Jetway case includes additional space for a DVD drive, so it is more like 110 by 260 millimeters. That's only 10 millimeters taller and about 60 millimeters longer than a typical mini PC case. Both cases are 60 to 65 millimeters wide. It's not like the Jetway is a behemoth, but when small size is a feature, the Jetway is definitely bigger. So here is the build list. The barebones kit was just $51.48. The kit covers a lot of parts for the build. Motherboard, CPU, a case fan, GPU, the case, and a power supply. A 2x2 gig kit of DDR2-800 RAM was $10.46. A 128 gig SSD for Windows 10 was $24.38. No, I did not register my copy of Windows for this build. That gives a grand total of $86.32. Not bad. It could be lower if I had chased down a cheaper used SSD on eBay instead of buying new on Amazon. How does this system work? Here are some benchmarks. At idle, this computer was running at a whopping 29 degrees above ambient temperature. That is hot, around 52°C for a system that is just sitting with the OS open. The semi-passive cooling is not very effective in this machine. The power draw is also high at 27 watts from the wall for this very low power system. The fact is, just managing Windows 10 is probably pushing this system pretty hard. In Cinebench R23, the single core score is just 82, dismal. Note that the CPU really didn't get that much hotter or draw much more power. It's already sweating with just Windows 10 and doesn't have a whole lot of headroom for Cinebench. The result for the multi-core score is 229, again, terrible, with a bit higher temperatures and a bit more power. Heaven on medium settings gave a score of 39. The CPU is a bit cooler, but the wall power draw is higher, likely with more power going to that beefy 20-watt GPU. I did play a bit of Lumber Tycoon 2 on Roblox. To get 18 FPS, I had to turn down the graphics to the minimum settings. At max settings, I could only get around 3 FPS. Well, these benchmarks are terrible, but I don't want to be too harsh on this system. In its defense, it is a home theater PC from 2011 that manages to at least simultaneously run Windows 10, the Roblox game player, and MSI Afterburner in 2021. I mean, that deserves at least some credit. Okay, just how poorly performing is this system? Let's compare it to a different, rather pitiful build that I recently put together, a system with a low power, 2-core, 2-thread Sandy Bridge Pentium CPU, the G720T. In the columns on the left are the numbers from the previous slide. Now let's add the Sandy Bridge numbers for comparison. This Pentium is a very, very modest CPU, and it absolutely mops the floor with the Atom D525. Look at the idle numbers. The wall power is way lower on the Pentium. The Pentium can actually handle Windows 10, and the Atom can't. Temperatures are far lower on the Pentium. But the Pentium does have a proper CPU fan. The Cinebench scores are awful for the Pentium, 409 and 776, but still way better than the Atom, 82 and 229. Keep in mind, for the multi-core score, the Atom has hyperthreading, but the Pentium does not. The Atom still loses big. Heaven is also better with the Pentium, which is using Intel integrated graphics. That's 2011 Intel integrated graphics, while the Atom has help from the NVIDIA Ion 2, which is a discrete GPU, a weak one on the motherboard, but still separate from the CPU. So while the Pentium really is a weakling, it delivers far better performance than the Atom while still requiring less power. The Atom D525 really has not held up well at all, but this system was probably a bit dated even when it was first released in 2011. So that is the build. What are my takeaways? On the plus side, this is a legitimate ITX build. The price was definitely easy on the budget at just over $80, with $25 of that being on an SSD that I'll likely continue to use elsewhere. The design of this system is really nice. I mean, the fit and finish of this product is really good. The screws and threads all fit well. I did get my first experience with a Molex connector. Like many people, I don't really like them, but at least now I've worked with Molex firsthand. So what are the cons? Well, this is essentially a pre-built system. I mean, I didn't even need to install the motherboard or I/O shield. Everything was ready to go except for the RAM and SSD. Building a computer is not much fun if there isn't anything to build. Another con is that the CPU is embedded. The CPU uses a BGA 559 socket, and like all BGA sockets, the CPU is soldered onto the board. It's not very exciting. Another drawback, the case is kind of big. I wanted to explore ITX builds because they can be very compact, and this PC has a lot of extra volume for a DVD drive. Finally, the complete system is essentially non-functional for any modern usage. I don't have high standards for a computer, but I admit that this PC would frustrate even me for browsing the web. That's my experience with a 10-year-old Jetway barebones home theater PC kit. The price was great. The value so-so. Sometimes you get what you pay for. I appreciate your watching to the end. Please consider subscribing, liking, or leaving a comment. Take care.